Thank you very much. I am honored and pleased to be here, and what a warm and wonderful setting this is. I'm going to talk to you about the current state of American politics, the situation facing our country, and focus very practically on some ways that we can be much more active and influential than we are in restoring our country. I'm an immigrant to the United States, and for the past almost 30 years, I have seen America through the experience of someone who grew up in a third world country. I still remember seeing the United States for the first time at the age of 17. This was New York City, an airplane just descending on JFK. I remember looking out the window. I saw the skyline of New York and the Statue of Liberty. And I remember just kind of a strange feeling came over me then. I realized somehow intuitively that my life would be completely different from that moment on. I recognized that I was moving from the margin of the world to the center, and that I would have a chance to be, if I stayed in America, the architect of my own destiny in a way that would have been probably impossible had I remained in India. Now, that experience of seeing in my life the American dream fulfilled, that experience was brought into a jolting halt about a year ago when I walked into a federal courtroom and saw a very portly bailiff bark out the phrase, "The United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza." And, you know, as an immigrant, that sends a strange feeling down your spine. And then, as a result of my adventures with the Obama administration, I was sentenced by a judge to spend 8 months in overnight confinement in a facility a federal facility on the Mexican border, supervised by the Bureau of Prisons of the Obama administration. Now, I should say, some of you may know, but others may not know the nature of my heinous crime. What I did was to donate $20,000 over the campaign finance limit to a friend of mine named Wendy Long. We went to Dartmouth together, and she was running for the U.S. Senate. So I wrote her a check for $10,000, which you're allowed to do. And then as the campaign went on, I released my movie, 2016. So I was bopping around the country, frenetically promoting the movie. And Wendy kept calling me to do more stuff. "Hey, Dinesh, can you come speak in Westchester? Hey, Dinesh, I know these 5 Indian doctors. Can you meet them?" I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Well, you know, you're Indian, they're Indian. They're going to help my campaign." And I felt really bad that I couldn't do more for her, so I basically came up with a cockamamie scheme. I told 2 of my friends to write her a check for $10,000, and I reimbursed them. So this is a violation of the campaign finance law. The Obama administration went into high gear, and even though my case didn't involve any corruption, I mean, I didn't stand to gain. This was an old friend of mine. She didn't even know I was doing this. They prosecuted me with the desire to send me off to federal prison for between 10 and 16 months. Now, it is worth noting that no person in American history has been to prison for committing this crime. In general, this goes to the FEC, the Election Commission. At the worst, they give you a fine and some community service. It's a civil matter. But the Holder Justice Department, the prosecutorial unit in New York, everyone went into high gear here. And a Clinton judge decided not to send me to federal prison, but instead to give me this overnight confinement. Now, by the way, right about the same time my case was migrating its way through the courts, another Asian Indian guy named Sant Chatwal, as I said last night, we Asian Indians appear to specialize in campaign finance violations. But anyway, this guy donated $180,000 in straw donations, meaning using substitutes, to Hillary Clinton and a whole group of Democratic candidates. In addition, he tried to convince witnesses to lie under oath. The FBI recorded him, so he was found guilty of witness tampering. And he was openly boasting that he was trying to buy off politicians, that they were all corrupt, he was corrupt. This was the only way to get them to do what he wanted. And yet he goes before a federal judge in New York and gets a fine and some community service, but no prison, no confinement, even though the amount that he had given was 9 times the amount that I did. So, the reason I mention this is because justice is not simply a matter of whether you broke the law. Justice is also a matter of, hey, does the penalty fit the crime? Justice is also a matter of, do other guys similarly situated who did the same thing get the same penalty, or roughly the same penalty? In this case, that's clearly not the case. And the reason that I mention all this, and the reason it's relevant to my topic of this afternoon, is because justice is the core virtue of American liberalism. If you think of the Democratic Party, its claim to be elected and re-elected is based upon justice. They are the party of fairness. That's why they keep talking about the fair share, social justice. Now, we, as Republicans, as conservatives, we have a different value that we tend to emphasize, and that is freedom, liberty. That's our core principle. But it's important to realize that liberty never trumps justice. It is actually secondary to it. If you read Aristotle's Politics, justice is the primary virtue of every society. And the reason that justice occupies a higher place than liberty is because there is such a thing as reasonable deprivations of liberty. People are deprived of freedom for good reason all the time, but there is no such thing as good injustice. Injustice is always bad. And so in politics, I think one of the reasons our team doesn't do as well as we would like is we play the king, freedom, and they play the ace, justice. This is another way of saying that in politics, it is important for us to contest the legitimacy of the Democratic Party's claim to justice. We need to be able to fight on that ground and not simply invoke another principle against it. Now, I walk into the confinement center my first day, and actually, to be honest, when I beat the prison rap, I went on the Megyn Kelly show, I was kind of relieved, I was sort of jubilant. But once I got to the confinement center, the guard behind the desk, he goes, "What prison are you coming from?" So I go, "Well, I haven't been to prison, this is my sentence." He goes, "Well, that's kind of a pity." So I said, "A pity?" He goes, "Well, yeah." He goes, "Federal prison." He goes, "That's a very interesting place." He goes, "If you go to white-collar prison," he goes, "you're going to meet business executives, a couple of mayors, city aldermen, doctors who defrauded Medicare, a rather eccentric and interesting group of people." He goes, "They even have an activities director over there." And I go, "Well, what about in here?" And he goes, "Oh, whole different class of people." Now, interestingly, in a confinement center, you get the whole gamut of criminals. Because once you serve your prison term, and it could be for armed robbery, drug smuggling, bringing coyotes across the border, whatever your crime, once you've served your time, attempted murder, you go to a halfway house or confinement center for 30, 60, or 90 days en route back to society. So I found myself, actually now that I look around, it wasn't quite as well appointed. It was about a room this size, and we all slept on bunk beds, 120 of us, hoodlums. So this was really quite a remarkable experience. For the first 3 or 4 weeks, I kept totally to myself. And the reason was that well, you just never know. There are all kinds of gangs in there, groups and gangs. And since this was on the Mexican border, the vast majority were Hispanic. But I discovered that even among the Hispanics, there are the American Hispanics, they're called Southsiders, and then there are the Mexicans. And they have their own groups and their own gangs. So I was like, gee, I mean, I can't talk to this guy because I'll offend that guy. So I better stay to myself. I mean, I did contemplate starting the Asian Indian gang, but didn't want to be the sole member. So after about a month, however, I decided to take up a different course of action. I said to myself, you know what, Dinesh? You're a conservative in a very unusual place. This is not a place where you're likely to run into a lot of other conservatives. I mean, what's the chance you'll go down the hallway and see George Will or Charles Krauthammer? It's not likely. So you're like an anthropologist in a strange land. Keep your eyes open, talk to people, try to learn something. So I began to do that. And over 8 months, I learned, I'm going to call it very broadly, the ideology of the criminal underclass. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all this is I discovered in that strange environment a big insight about American politics, which is the heart of what I'm going to talk about and helps us to see politics in a completely new way. This may seem very odd. We're talking about a bunch of criminals. By the way, my previous experience with the criminal underclass was mainly by watching The Shawshank Redemption, where all the criminals kind of famously profess their own innocence. But in talking to these actual guys over a period of months, I realized that their viewpoint is actually somewhat different and more interesting. So their view is, we are not innocent. We did it. But we are the small fry. We are actually the stupid criminals because we got caught. That's why we're here. The big fry never get caught. The big fry are out there. In fact, the system never goes after them because they run the system. And so what we have here is a kind of I would call it a group of people who see life at a very elemental level. These are guys on their bunk beds as I lie down listening to them talk. They talk about money, they talk about food, they talk about sex, and that's pretty much all they talk about. Their horizons are very limited. They see life, you may say, only from the ground level. And the reason that this is eye-opening to me is because I have lived life, the Reagan White House, the American Enterprise Institute, the Hoover Institution at Stanford. So I have seen America, you might say, as an intellectual. I've looked at America as the American politics as a clash of ideas. The Republicans believe this, the Democrats believe that, as if to say that American politics is some kind of a lofty debate between two competing sets of idealisms. Well, it is the point of view of the criminal underclass that this whole way of talking about American politics is pure and total bullshit. In other words, from their point of view, human beings are not motivated that way. And to look at politics or life as if it was some kind of a polite clash of ideas is to miss the reality that human beings are actually motivated by avarice and lust and greed and hatred and revenge and envy. And not to see this is to take ultimately a mystifyingly obscure and obscurantist view that misses what's really going on. Again, this is the point of view of criminals, but I should say that their point of view is the same point of view that is actually articulated by the philosopher Machiavelli. Writing about the ancient thinkers from Aristotle, Plato, on through the medieval writers, Machiavelli says that they all write about imagined powers and principalities that have never in truth been known to exist. In other words, what Machiavelli is saying is that writers before him are always imagining the world as it ought to be. But they don't look at the world as it is. And so, as a result, they miss what's going on right in front of them. And that's the point of view I want to bring this afternoon to American politics. I don't think it's a view that you will have heard either on the Democratic debates or the Republican debates. This is the point of view that looks at American politics under the surface and from the ground level. Now, we have been living for the last 8 years under an administration that has vowed to remake America and has been actively doing it. I cannot tell you how often I turn on Fox News or listen to the president, listen to the presidential candidates, and I keep hearing about Obama doesn't understand this, and Obama doesn't know that. So we as conservatives have been conducting an 8-year Obama education project. We're always trying to tell him how the world really is. Hey, Obama, can we remind you that Vladimir Putin used to be a KGB officer? Hey, Obama, when the mullahs say they want to build a bomb, they probably do. Hey, Obama, confiscatory taxation is not very good for productivity and jobs. So we've been conducting this Obama education project, and the president is proving to be an unbelievably slow learner. He never gets it. Now, is this because he's a total dummy? He doesn't know what's going on? No. In reality, I think we need to realize we have to look at the whole landscape of politics a slightly different way. So now I want you to imagine a guy who has been working really hard for a living, adding up numbers all day or sweeping office floors, and his home is underwater and his credit card bills are too high and he's struggling and he's mad and he's going home from work here in Bloomfield or in Chicago or in Boston, and as he's walking home, he looks through a restaurant window, the glass doors of a restaurant, and inside he can see all these people, and they're eating, and they're drinking, and they're pouring wine, and they're digging their knives into thick steaks, and nice cars are pulling up at the front. And this guy just finds a strange, powerful feeling come over him, which essentially goes, what the heck? What the heck? He begins to feel that very powerful human emotion called envy. Envy. Now, envy is the most secretive of human emotions, because with envy, not only do we never admit it to someone else, hey, one of my qualities is I tend to be rather envious. We don't say that. But we don't even admit it to ourselves. Never has a man looked in the mirror and said, there stands an envious man. We deny it. We deny it. And envy is also, I would say, the worst of all the vices, the lowest. Why? Because it has no admixture of any good in it. This may seem like an odd thing to say, but every other one of the 7 deadly sins has a good side. Anger. Anger is one of the 7 deadly sins, and it should be. But Aristotle says to be angry with the right person, at the right time, in the right way, and for the right reason is a virtue. Envy is camouflaged in its badness because it is often confused with jealousy. People use envy and jealousy synonymously, but envy and jealousy are actually opposites. Jealousy is being angry at being deprived of something that is yours. Envy is being angry at being deprived of something to which you have no right. Think for a moment about Shakespeare's play Othello. Othello is envious. Othello's jealous. Why is he jealous? He thinks his wife is having an affair with another man. He's mistaken, but if she were having an affair, he would be right to be annoyed. Jealousy is being furious at being deprived of something to which you have a legitimate right. Now, Iago, the villain, is envious. And of another character, Cassio, Iago says, "He hath a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly." So what has Cassio done to Iago? Nothing. But just by being a better man, just by being a good guy, Iago feels inferior and hates him and wants to destroy him and does. So what I'm getting at is, here's the guy standing out of the glass looking at the restaurant. He feels this powerful sense of envy, which goes right along with a sense of resentment and a sense of hatred. Now, envy should never be confused with emulation. If the guy says, "Oh, you know what? This is great. Look at all those guys. They've obviously been really successful. That guy thought of a new app. That guy started a new business. That guy went to graduate school and worked really hard. So I should go back to graduate school. I should put my thinking cap on." That's not envy. That's emulation. But when someone goes, "I don't know how to pull myself up, but it would give me a lot of pleasure to see those people pulled down," that's envy. That's envy at the core of it. So here you have this fellow smoldering with envious rage, when who should come galloping up by a fellow on a white horse who dismounts, and he is unidentified except for his name tag, which simply bears the label community organizer. And this guy dismounts and he comes up, and now I should say parenthetically that this community organizer, this Obama type, is the most envious man of all. Something that might seem paradoxical. How can someone who's the President of the United States be envious? Well, it's because we live in an entrepreneurial society. The greatest rewards of our society go to people who create new things, people who create new innovations or new products. And the most successful, in a way the most ingenious, the most highly rewarded entrepreneurs are people who envision people's wants even before they have them. So normally, a successful businessman responds to human wants. You need to eat. I own 15 McDonald's. I'm going to be able to respond to your demand. But when you think about the iPhone, nobody wrote Steve Jobs and said, "I want a phone that does this and does that and has apps and I can go on the internet." He thought of it, he made it, he marketed it before you knew you couldn't live without it. So so this is the supply side entrepreneur. Now, think of Obama. Can Obama make an iPhone? I mean, that poor guy can't even put up a website. So these people, like Obama and Hillary, from an entrepreneurial point of view, from the point of view of running a productive business, they are complete losers, complete zeros. And they know it. But we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that this makes them incompetent or stupid. They're actually extremely skilled, but they're extremely skilled at doing something else. What is that something else? That something else, in my view, I mean, Obama's not really a community organizer. He's really a resentment organizer. He's a masterful massager and mobilizer of human resentment. And he's not alone. This Obama team has a whole group of allies, and they are all in the same business. So Obama has powerful allies in the media, in academia, and if you think about this group, what does it produce? It produces words. These guys they don't do fracking. They don't make iPhones. But what they are really good at is they manufacture powerful not just intellectual, emotional words, and they mobilize a whole politics behind it. So part of what I'm saying is there's a clash in American politics, in my view, between two groups of people. On one side, the productive class. I don't just mean the entrepreneur. Everybody who works making something productive, you're part of wealth creation. You're the wealth creators of America. And you have produced, collectively, I would say, the most valuable thing the world has ever made. What's the most valuable thing the world has ever made? Is it the airplane, the telegraph, the iPhone, the computer? No. The most valuable thing the world has ever made is the United States of America. $90 trillion of wealth in this country. That's what the United States is worth if you add up everything, including this building, including all the money in your bank accounts, including all the furniture in your homes. Add it all up. That's one big Fort Knox of American wealth. And the big question in American politics, a very simple question, it's not about a clash of idealisms. Who controls that wealth? And there's a big fight between the wealth-creating class and another class, let's call it loosely the knowledge industry. And that group believes we should control that wealth. Not that we should make it. This isn't socialism. Obama and Hillary are too lazy to be socialists, because socialism would mean they would actually have to run the schools. They would actually have to dig and frack. They would actually have to have the government control industry. They don't want to do that. They want private industry to create wealth. But the moment the oil has come out of the ground and put into barrels, they want to swoop in and take charge of how that wealth is then deployed. So this is a fight over stealing America. Stealing America. And to return to my scenario, the community organizer dismounts from his horse, goes up to the guy who's smoldering with envy and resentment and hatred, feeling actually a little impotent and frankly a little disgusted with himself. There's a sense of self-disgust because at some level you have to know that the reason that you're in this position is that compared to those guys, they did it and you didn't. So you're feeling all these conflicting emotions. The genius of Obama is to reinterpret your grievance and give it a political focus. So Obama comes to the guy and he goes, listen, you, my friend, are not envious at all. Don't feel bad. You are righteously indignant. Why? Because you see all those people in that restaurant? All of them have been stealing from you. They are actually in possession of your stuff. So, the good news is you don't have to organize a proletarian workers' revolution. You only have to vote for me. I and my friends will go in there and forcibly take their stuff. And then we will give some of it to you. So this is actually, I think, an on-the-ground description of the core modus operandi of American progressivism. It's essentially a scheme to mobilize one class of people politically and extract wealth from the wealth creators, thus empowering the progressive class in the process. If you think about it, Hillary's education scheme, echoed, by the way, by Bernie Sanders, except Hillary knows what's going on and Bernie doesn't. So Hillary's scheme is, I'm going to help you to go to college for free. Students go, wow, that's really fantastic. Hillary goes, it's only going to cost $350 billion. Now, the federal government doesn't have $350 billion. To remind you, we are $17 trillion in debt. $19 trillion in debt. I tend to understate my case for effect. So what Hillary is promising to do is say, all right, we'll still spend the money, which means we'll have to add to the debt. And of course, where's that debt? Who are we going to hand off that debt to? Young people. So essentially, to spend money now is to reach into the back pocket of young people and spend their future earnings. So really what Hillary's saying is, young man, I'm going to take your money that you haven't earned yet. I'm going to spend it now on you. In other words, I'm going to give you some of your own money now. And in exchange for that, I want you to believe that I have given you a free education and you should swear lifelong allegiance to the Democratic Party. Without the Democratic Party, you wouldn't have had an education. This is not even robbing Peter to pay Paul, it's robbing Paul to pay Paul. But even though Paul doesn't come out ahead, he's spending his own money, Hillary does. Because the transaction, while in a sense being economically neutral, does create a Democratic voter. Now, let me pivot and close because I want to leave time for discussion. I want to focus a little bit about our situation in response to this. Because we have, I'm sorry to say, we Republicans, conservatives, we have sort of let this happen. Number one, we have let this happen by not recognizing that politics is part of a much larger battlefield. Politics is only one corner of that battlefield. We focus on the political. Everywhere I go, Dinesh, of those 13 guys, who do you support? 2 years ago, Dinesh, is the Republicans going to take the Senate? Well, the Republicans took the Senate, took the House. Somehow it doesn't seem to have made that big of a whole lot of difference. Why not? People say, well, of course why not? Because of Boehner, because of McConnell, rhinos, wimps. But why are they wimps? What are they afraid of? Does Boehner want Obama to succeed? No. McConnell either. They're afraid of the media. They're afraid that if they do what we want, they will be savaged and castigated every day. They will be ridiculed by comedians, and at the end of the day, their reputation will be so much in tatters that the Bloomfield Women's Republican Club would not invite them to speak. Our team would bury them. So they have a rational fear that they would be destroyed. Now, who would have that kind of power? The answer is that while we Republicans have been in a political huddle, the Democrats have targeted all the powerful institutions of our culture. And these are the institutions that have big megaphones. One of the big megaphones in America is Hollywood. Huge megaphone. Hollywood is totally dominated by the left. Broadway, another big megaphone, dominated by the left. Comedy. The left has Bill Maher, they have Colbert, they have Jon Stewart. We have nobody, nobody, and nobody. So for young people who get their ideas through comedy, we have completely conceded the territory to the other side. The left dominates higher education. The more prestigious and elite the campus, the more fully they control it. Huge megaphone, shaping the minds of young people at a formative age of life. Elementary and secondary education. And so, how can we, forget win, how can we compete in a battle in which we have little ridiculously small megaphones? Well, we have Fox News. We have talk radio. Well, first of all, talk radio and Fox News are the same. Fox News is just talk radio on TV. So we have tiny megaphones competing against huge megaphones. That's problem number one. The second problem is, at the end of the election, we pack up and we go home. The left keeps pushing, and the left keeps fighting. They're much more committed to the fight than we are. And this applies in all sectors of the fight. Consider the Supreme Court. There are 4 solid conservatives on the court, and there are 4 liberals. And the 5th guy is a Republican appointee, Kennedy. The truth of it is, when a case goes before the court, no matter on what topic, the left can count with Euclidean certitude on its 4 votes. They're in the bag before the case is even heard. We can't count on our votes. We go, ooh, let's hope we get Kennedy. Ooh, we got Kennedy. Whoops, we lost Roberts. Now, why does this happen? This happens because our team is engaged in an intellectual exercise, and their team is coming to a knife fight. Our team is pondering the Constitution, and their team is acting like good Democrats. So as a result, there is an inequity of effort between our side and their side. They want to win more, they're willing to fight harder, and that's why they win. Now, What do? The truth of it is we can actually do a lot. If I just look at this room right here, there is actually a huge amount of concentrated influence available in this room. Most of it, I have to say, probably unused, because most people use a very tiny fraction of their actual influence. In reality, influence correctly deployed has lethal effect. I'll give a brief example of this. A year and a half ago, through a very interesting set of transactions, the retail giant Costco decided to pull all copies of my book America from its shelves in every Costco around the country. Now that alone is a probable example of the left using its influence, because the Costco top brass are Democrats. I don't know how this happened, but just to speculate, somebody from the Obama White House walks into Costco, or Rahm Emanuel walks into Costco, or somebody walks into Costco. What the heck is this Obama critic's book doing all over Costco? Make a few phone calls. Hello, gentlemen. You're very valued contributors to the Democratic National Committee. We allow you to jump up and down in the Lincoln bedroom. If you enjoy that exercise, you might want to reconsider having this D'Souza fellow's book. And whatever happens, my book is pulled. Boom. That's a very effective strike. I'm an author. I mean, imagine if someone pulls my books from Barnes & Noble. How do I function? So that's the left. That's how they function. Now, a reporter finds out about this, and this wasn't Rush Limbaugh or Megyn Kelly. I didn't even know about it. This reporter writes for the website WorldNet Daily. WorldNet Daily. So he writes an article, and his readers are in an uproar. Big hubbub on WorldNet Daily. 1,000 comments on his article. Costco's terrible. How can Costco do this? This guy's a patriot. It's the 4th of July. How can you pull his book America? This is a little online mob fulminating on the WorldNet Daily site. So far, the social effect is zero. Why? Because Costco doesn't care what happens on WorldNet Daily. But then, in what I think will probably be looked back as a really good example in the history of social media of effective redeployment of forces, somebody in that group said, why are we on this site? We should be on the site marked Costco. And so this little snowball begins to move toward Costco, except now it gathers more snow, and within a very short time, it's 17,000 people. Bigger number, but still not a gargantuan number. 17,000 people raging on the Costco site, and within 24 hours, the Costco site is completely destroyed. By destroyed, I don't mean vandalized. They didn't do anything like that. But when you go to Costco and you buy things, you can comment as a reader, as a consumer. If you buy a pair of jeans, you can read the comments. Buy a barbecue grill, read the comments. So whenever you clicked on any item, it didn't matter what, on Costco, you would see very dignified ladies in Texas or California or Florida or Michigan cutting up their Costco card or mailing little pieces back to the CEO. And so Costco does 1/2 of its worldwide business on its site. This was a complete nightmare. So the CEO goes into a panic mode. He invites me to come to Seattle to see him. I do. The first words out of his mouth, and I quote him, are, Dinesh, you are destroying Costco. A multi-billion-dollar corporation with massive customer loyalty. And I'm destroying. He made it really clear his own job was on the line, and he even appealed to my sentiment by saying, all these people who work for $13 an hour, you're threatening all their jobs in Costco's all around the country. So anyway, I didn't fall for it. You mean, he was treating me a bit like Jesse Jackson, like, what are your non-negotiable demands? And I'm like, I have no demands. You don't have to stock my book. But you chose to, and I think it's really odd that 2 weeks later you pull it. Anyway, I get back to San Diego, and by the time my plane lands, Costco has A, reversed its decision, B, restored my books to all the shelves of all the stores, C, ordered 25,000 more copies, D, when my movie came out 2 weeks later, they built a special stand about the size of this podium only for my DVD. Everybody else's DVDs was on the big table. This was just for my DVDs. Now, my point is, that is applying concentrated power in a very lethal way. That is realizing that all of us have friends, and those friends have friends. So, sometimes we feel like, well, social media, gee, I'm just not used to it. The truth of it is, if you build a little following of 1,000 people on social media, not that hard to do. I have 250,000 on Twitter. I have over 1 million on Facebook. If you have 1,000, you're a little publisher. And not only can you publish for these 1,000 people, but they all have followings. So your impact is multiplied. You become an incredibly powerful transmitter of information. Now, I have a movie that's coming out in July. I have to think about when to release that movie for maximum effect, right? My answer, release it the week of the Democratic Convention, right? Because the Republican Convention is the previous week. The Democrats put out their narrative. Our movie, by the way, it leaves my other two movies totally in the dust. This is an extremely powerful movie, A Secret History of Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. The whole story. Now, number one, when the movie opens, the opening weekend is absolutely critical. We opened 2016 in one theater and expand it out. We'll open this movie in probably 1,500 theaters all around the country. Now, if we do really well on opening weekend, we'll be in 2,000 theaters the next week. If we do poorly, we'll go from 1,500 to 1,100. So the point is, opening weekend is critical. And so for you, if you say, oh, I really want to watch the movie, but I like watching it at home on DVD, no, if you go opening weekend, you are actually putting fuel in our rocket. And think of it, I'm not asking you to give $1,000. A movie's $10. If you buy 10 tickets and give them out of the local high school and those guys go, you're putting fuel in our rocket. These are very practical ways that you can have an impact. If you buy out a theater as a group, make it a social event, all go watch the movie. Again, it costs you as a club nothing. Everybody buys their own ticket. It has tremendous impact for us. The movie then comes out in DVD in October. All right? You want to be really ambitious and really effective and become a very dangerous Republican club in this country? Here's how you do that. Because a lot of times I'm in California. I go to my fiance's from Texas. California women say, well, gee, my vote is wasted because this is a liberal state. Texans say, oh, my vote is useless because Texas is obviously going to go for the Republicans. Okay, so now how do we take our influence and put it where it's going to have an effect? The truth of it is there are a finite number of independent voters in this country. The good thing is that the names and addresses of those independent voters is known. We have it. And so you could decide, I can't do this, but you can decide as a club, all right, we're going to target 50,000 independent voters in Ohio or in Florida or in Ohio, Florida, and Colorado. And we're going to buy, really at pennies on the dollar, DVDs of this movie, which will, as I say, be messaging of a kind that is very different than what you'll see from the RNC. The RNC has plenty of money to buy commercials. And the Koch brothers are encrusted with consultants who will buy commercials. But we have a full-length movie, and a movie can change someone's mind. So you say, all right, we're going to decide as a club that we're going to get a bunch of DVDs and drop them into the mailboxes of the very people who will decide the election in swing states. You can do that. And you can do that quite inexpensively and very powerfully. That is a way of Costco style, putting your influence exactly where it counts. The party will spend $40, $50, $100 to get one vote. You can aim to get that vote for 50 cents. Again, by thinking creatively. I mentioned earlier all these institutions, the media, the universities. And it introduces a feeling of hopelessness. How can we fight the universities? How can we take over the universities? Well, we can't. We can't. You can send me to speak at the University of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We can have little Hillsdale College in Michigan here that's a little island, an alternative to the university system, but we can't change the university system. It's too powerful right now. But the good news is we don't have to do that. The universities now are like the rotary phone industry. We don't have to take it over. But what we do have to do, very difficult task, I admit, is we have to build the academic iPhone. If you can figure out how to deliver education at a high quality and at a vastly lower cost than is currently the case, you will completely destroy, or more accurately, replace the entire university system. I'll close on this note. The chemist Henry Bessemer, who figured out a new way to refine steel. He did his little experiment, and he says, I looked at the result, and I saw that it worked. It worked. And then he writes this in his journal. He goes, I could see in my mind's eye the great iron industry of the world collapsing. And he goes, all its enormous power, all its hundreds of millions of dollars of resources, all of it was powerless in the face of the result of my little experiment. The guy figured out a better way to do it. He knew the whole world was going to move his way, as indeed it did. So we are in a very difficult and challenging, but also hopeful situation. And we have been doing way too little for our team, way too little, quite frankly, for our country, all of us. In my own career, I've been a writer and speaker. I realize that influence is way too limited. There are only so many people who walk into Barnes & Noble to buy a book. That's why I went into movies. I'm only getting started because documentary films are no big deal. The big heroes in Hollywood are not Michael Moore, Steven Spielberg. Hollywood's biggest stories are told as comedies, thrillers, dramas, animated films. Ultimately, we have to do all that if we want to tell our story. So here we are in America. The American dream, in my view, hangs in the balance. It's our chance to do something for our country. If we will band together, if we will think creatively, if we will work in a concentrated way, we can certainly do it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, a little Q&A.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Whoops. Do you think Ted Cruz's remark of New York and the left coast being liberal was incorrect, and why? Or maybe it wasn't. How would you have handled this?
Well, look, I think descriptively, it is true that the United States is regionally quite divided. This is not to say that there aren't red people in the blue states and blue people in the red states, but the country is two coasts. If America was only the West Coast and the East Coast, the Republican Party may as well shut down. We would never win an election ever. So part of what I do when I raise money for our films, we have investors who fund our films. I focus on Florida, Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Houston, Dallas. And what I'm always telling entrepreneurs in Dallas is, listen, Boston is the intellectual capital of America. Washington is the political capital. LA is the entertainment capital. If we don't fight back from the middle of the country, ultimately, we have no long-term chances at all. So now I'm not running for president. So when you're running for president, you need that Reagan-esque instinct for what you can and should say, because you've got to be effective. And so Ted Cruz was descriptively right about that. I'm not sure if that was the most prudent thing to say.
As a junior senator, Hillary Clinton made trip after trip to the Middle East. I observed this was strange. 15 years later, our universities have received millions of dollars for Islamic studies. Propaganda. The Clinton Foundation is vastly funded by foreign interests. She is running for president, well-funded by... Can you read it?
By whom?
By whom? Thank you. Nobody asked this question. Thank you.
All right, so the Clinton Foundation. This is a very good question because about 8 months ago, a fellow that I don't know well, but I know somewhat, Peter Schweitzer, wrote the book Clinton Cash. Now, Peter Schweitzer is a think tank guy. He has about 4 researchers who work for him. And this is the first and only book to document the misdoings of the Clinton Foundation. So think about it. We Republicans have half the country. We have hundreds of millions of dollars being deployed in this election. We don't even have an investigative squad that is digging the kind of information that could be vital to bringing the Clintons down. We're not even attempting it. Why didn't this information come out from the RNC? What are those people doing with all the resources that they have? So what are the Koch brothers doing? The point I'm trying to get is, and I'm speaking with exceptional kind of candor here, the truth of the matter is our team wastes a lot of our resources. Our young people all want to be Rush Limbaugh. They all want to be pundits. Facts change minds, not opinion. You need investigative reporters who can dig out facts, who are willing to go through tax returns, who are willing to trace the Canadian billionaire who has interests in Africa and wants to get the contract for aid in Haiti. And that's why he gives $50,000 to Bill Clinton just to shake his hand and $500,000 the next year to speak, because that's opening up contacts with the Clinton Foundation while Hillary is Secretary of State. Who is doing this work on our side? No one. No one. So in some senses, literally to just sit around and say, oh, gee, you know, the other side would do it to us. They would deploy, they've got Media Matters, they would deploy 300 reporters. They pay people to go on my Twitter and just run me down every single day to demoralize people like me and make me think, what the heck, why don't you go do something else? It's not even worth it. It takes a peculiarly perverse personality such as mine to persist. And not only to persist, but to actually enjoy it.
Given your comments last night on national security and immigration, and given that FBI Director James Comey, Clapper, and so many other heads of our intelligence community are warning there are no databases to vet the refugees, what is your thinking on the push by the Obama administration to bring refugees to the United States?
So we have to sort of hand it to Obama, because this guy has shown that he can unilaterally move the goalpost to the left, even if what he is doing is not supported by the Congress, not supported by the Supreme Court, not supported by the people of America. His point is, who's going to stop me? And the answer is, none of us. We have shown no ability to be able to stop him. So what's the point of having this constitutional government with separation of powers and checks and balances and all these blocking techniques that the founders put into place precisely to stop this kind of thing from going on if no one will actually do it? So the truth of it is, they have the presidency, as we did in the 80s. We have the Congress, as they did in the 80s. But notice how effectively Tip O'Neill could deploy the Congress against Reagan. All kinds of blocking techniques. They have the power. They have the money. Congress appropriates all the money. So the money is ours to appropriate. We have enormous power. But our team is intimidated. Our team doesn't want to tackle on the field. And so the result of it is Obama is able to get away with it. Hillary, this is Hillary's modus operandi. I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to march forward, and I don't care what anybody has to say. I dare you, if you want to stop me, you have to bludgeon me to the ground and then sit on me. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Don't we wish we had a candidate of that kind of tenacity?
Yeah, we sure do. What do you think about Obama going to the mosque yesterday?
Well, this is in line with what I just said. Obama basically is fearless. Just think about it. For a Democratic president in the wake of 9/11, in the wake of all these rumors, he's a secret Muslim, hey, Obama, do you take your prayer rug with you? The point of it is he doesn't care. His point is, I want to go to a mosque, I'm going to a mosque. And I have the chutzpah to stand up and say, our biggest problem in America isn't Islamic terrorism, it's Islamophobia. I'm going to lecture the country on this topic, and again, I'm going to rely on the fact that I've got a supportive media that will genuflect and applaud. I've got an American people that may be unhappy about this, but don't really want to take on the first black president, don't really want to make him look bad, don't really want him to fail, and so every time he does something bad, we always pretend like his aides are behind it. Even Republicans will go, who's behind Obama? Like, who's behind Obama? Obama's not the pawn of anybody, they're his pawns. Obama is the problem. And so, similarly, who's behind Hillary? No one's behind Hillary. Hillary is driving the sled. So, yes, an act of unbelievable chutzpah. It's a measure of how our politics have changed. We're not dealing with Kerry or Dukakis or Jimmy Carter or Truman. This is a new Democratic Party with a new bunch of guys running the show.
Which GOP candidate would be most effective at reversing Obama's destruction of the United States?
I'm going to pass on that question for this reason. We all have to think tactically. And in a few months, I'm going to release a big movie in over 1,000 theaters. And the first thing that the left will try to do is say, this movie was bought and paid for by the Republican National Committee. This movie is an extension of the Ted Cruz campaign. This movie was funded by the Koch brothers. I have to preemptively stop all that by making sure that I haven't taken any sides in the Republican contest. I take no money from the Kochs or the RNC. I stay away from all that. And as a result, I can claim to make an independent film. Now, yes, does it reflect a point of view? Sure. But Michael Moore has a point of view. Oliver Stone has a point of view. Steven Spielberg has a point of view. Having a point of view is fine. The left will try very hard to discredit the movie, and for this reason, even at the risk of seeming a little bit cagey, I have my own opinion, but I'm deliberately staying out of the internecine Republican fight.
Do you believe that Hillary Clinton will ever be prosecuted for her private email server?
So, I think it's unlikely because it relies on two things happening. One is it relies on the FBI and the FBI director, admittedly a good guy, taking the boldness of not only privately recommending indictment but publicly doing it, which would risk Comey's job because he is an appointee of the president. And not only does all that have to happen, difficult enough as it is, but then the Loretta Lynch Holder Justice Department has to indict her. And they're going to be taking orders from the Obama White House. So what are the chances of all that happening? Look, we shouldn't have the politics of living in desperate hopefulness. This is like the people who are living in desperate hopefulness that Obama would turn out to be born in Mombasa. This is not the way to have politics. The way you have politics is you say, the way to stop the Clinton campaign is for Hillary to be indicted. For Hillary to be indicted, we have to figure out a way of indicting her that does not involve the Justice Department, because they are very unlikely to do it. So just as Governor Perry was indicted by a Democratic state attorney general in San Antonio, we have to ask, how can we make sure that there's a state attorney general in the Republican camp who will bring an indictment against Hillary Clinton? An indictment would be a lethal blow to her campaign. But an indictment is unlikely to come, in my opinion, from the Obama Justice Department, as my own tiny case illustrates.
Does our team have as much vested interest in big government as the Democrats?
Our team does not have the same interest in big government as the Democrats, but our team has an even bigger interest in preventing the stealing of America. because the stealing of America is the stealing of our money. And I'm not just talking about, I can't believe the idiocy of Silicon Valley guys who go, oh, well, the top rate is 38%. It may go up to 40. Who cares? No, the Democrats and the left don't want to raise your tax rate from 38 to 40. They want to take all your wealth. They're not interested in income at the end of the day. They're interested in wealth. And so look at what's happened under Obama, the way in which the government now controls private wealth and private industry. The government is now issuing dictation orders to banks, investment houses, insurance companies, hospitals, every hospice, every healthcare part of the country, the energy sector through the EPA, increasingly through education. These are gigantic private industries. Obama can now fire the head of General Motors because he took a bailout. So the government is extending its tentacles into the private sector and is after private wealth. So imagine if you were 100 years ago moving out west and you want to start a business like cattle ranching, and you know that there are all these outlaws out there who want to actually kill your cattle and take your homestead. You say, look, I'm going to have to invest a significant part of my wealth to protect the homestead. Our team is not doing that. Our team is acting like if we send $50 to the Republican Party, this is going to protect us from the other side. The other side is on a roll. And if we don't realize that we have much more at stake than they do and are willing to invest more, again, for our own protection, then all our entrepreneurial success in this country, my whole life in this country is dependent upon the existence of an America and a free market system, which is itself the target of the other side. So we have a very direct stake in the matter.
Okay, last question. I'm going to have your help. Do you think envy can be
Overcome.
Oh, see, I knew it. Do you think envy can be overcome if people can feel that they have hope for a better future?
Several times in history, the capitalist system is jolted by a confluence of events that come out of capitalism itself, but produce rapid social change. A really good example would be the fact that most Americans at one time lived on farms. 70% of Americans were in farming. And then in a short amount of time, because of the developments of tractors and new fertilizers and so on, suddenly it became the fact within a short space of time that a small group of farmers, about 5% of the population, could not only feed the whole country, but could actually feed large parts of the rest of the world. So now we have a problem. What about all those people who make a living in farming? The sad truth of it is they got to go do something else. There's no other answer to them. You can keep them on the farm, you can pay them not to grow crops, you can do all that nonsense, but at the end of the day, it is the case that we only need this many people to be in farming to achieve the purpose that farming exists to do. Now, we live at a time when, not just as a result of globalization, that's part of it, but also technology. We have seen a massive transformation of the American economy in a very short space of time, rendering whole groups of people, their job can now be done more cheaply in some other way. And so those guys are saying, now what? And that's, as I say, that's partly the result of immigration, it's partly the result of globalization, it's partly the result of technology. Now here's my point. Obama and Hillary have no intention of addressing this core problem. They'll never say, these are the three problems, and here's what we intend to do. In fact, far from trying to restrict immigration, they want to increase it. They obviously can't stop technology. They wouldn't even dream of doing that. And globalization appears to be another fait accompli. So Obama's strategy is to pretend that the things he wants to do nothing about don't matter, and that the real problem is evil CEOs flying around in corporate jets. Now notice Obama flies around in a corporate jet, and the difference between the CEOs and him is that they pay for their own jets. But nevertheless, these evil CEOs are the reason why you're having job insecurity. No. So this is part of our problem. We can't have an honest debate over what the source of the problem is and what to do about it. Honestly, not a whole lot of clarity coming from the Republican side of it either. These are not easy problems, and like I say, long term, they involve transitions in our economy. Look, on the table I have a few more copies of Stealing America. This is a different kind of expose of the Democratic Party, because it actually looks at them not just as a movement of ideas. That's wrong. We have to combat their ideas, like I said earlier about justice. But we also have to realize what they're up to, Like, look at something like Benghazi. People say, Hillary Clinton got the phone call. Hillary Clinton didn't respond. But most people are reluctant to believe that because they think, well, why wouldn't Hillary Clinton respond? Any American who gets a phone call, yeah, send in some jets and protect those guys. What's the big deal? Why would somebody not care? Or Hillary Clinton has a private email server. She sent classified emails. Yeah, but Hillary goes, well, yeah, everybody has I have 3 emails myself, and so I had 2 emails. So what? Big deal. Because no one's asking the key question. Why would Hillary have a private server? Why would somebody take the trouble to do that? Confidential emails take a lot of trouble. You have to go in a special room. You've got to be searched. They've got to watch you while you're sending those emails. It's a completely different system. You and I can't send an email to a confidential system at all. It's an alternative universe. So Hillary would have to put a thumb drive into the confidential emails, have it physically taken out. Her aides would have to conspire with her to do that. Now, Hillary's smart. Why would she do that? My answer is very simple. The Clintons are in the business of stealing America. They basically have figured out a way to make huge amounts of money on foreign policy. Now, by the way, they're not alone in this. This is part of my movie, but there's a whole Democratic history of doing this. When Andrew Jackson, who's the founder of the Democratic Party, was a general, he would go to the Indians, and there were all these treaties with the Indians. But he would essentially strong-arm the Indians and tell them, listen, we want you to clear 2 million acres of land right here. And then Jackson would call up all his Democratic friends, even before the Indians agreed, and tell them to start buying the land that was going to be given to the federal government by his force and then turned over for public sale. So Jackson's men would move in. Jackson would appoint surveyors to go through that land and mark it all out, and his friends would come in and buy all the land. So by the time the land came up for sale, it was already sold to Jackson and all his friends. And Jackson went from $0 to $100 million in about 20 years by doing this. So what I'm trying to say is this is not new. The roots of the Clinton Foundation are in the land-stealing policies of Andrew Jackson 150 years ago. Now, Stealing America I'm writing 2 books, one on Hillary, I'm doing now, and the movie is based on both books. So you can get a little preview, if you want, of that book. And so I wanted, Diane, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the club for sponsoring this event. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We are honored.
Thank you. Thank you so much.